Appalachia has long been home to some of the most legendary men in the history of America. Brawny pioneers who feared neither man nor beast. I've told many of their stories here on the Appalachian Storyteller. But perhaps the most infamous of them all is none other than Fightin' Dick Collie, and this is his incredible true story. Our story begins in 1806 in Virginia. America was just 2 decades removed from winning her independence during the Revolutionary War. And with no foreign king to keep them from settling new lands, the white pioneers began pushing further and further westward, and even crossed over the mighty Appalachian Mountains into Native American land towards the Mississippi River. Rich men began purchasing huge tracts of mountain wilderness, hoping that one day they would be able to harvest the vast natural resources of the forest. And once they acquired the deed to these new lands, they had to protect it from squatters moving in and homesteading on it. One such investor was a man named Andrew Hepburn, a wealthy businessman who purchased nearly 400,000 acres, nearly 600 square miles, of untamed land that bordered the Kentucky-Virginia state line, known as the Sandy Basin. At this point in history, no white man had ever set foot in this vast wilderness, and for good reason too. You see, the Sandy Basin laid on the southeastern slope of the mighty Pine Mountain and was walled in by mountains on all sides, forming a natural highland bowl of thick, unbroken virgin forest. Its granite walls reached towards the heavens and was teeming with deadly panthers, bears, and wildcats, who for eons had ruled this untamed American jungle. Mr. Hepburn began placing ads in newspapers looking to employ any man that would move to the isolated area and act as a caretaker and overseer to protect his property. Yet, nary a single soul would take that job. After all, it was surely a death sentence to set foot on that cursed land. If the panthers didn't eat you, the wolves surely would. Months went by, and no one would take the job, regardless of the pay. Enter into this story a 13-year-old boy named Dick Collie. The youngster had grown up in Reed's Valley on a 350-acre farm, where he passed his days by plowing fields, hoeing Indian corn, and doing the 1,000 chores that made up the life of a farm boy. But Dick wasn't your typical youngster. At just 13 years old, he was as big as most men, with large, square shoulders, and he was fearless and Herculean in strength, and he could handle himself in any rough and tumble situation. Bravery was just in his blood. His father had been an over-mountain man and was a hero in the King's Mountain Battle during the Revolutionary War. Dick was cut in his father's image, to say the least. A skilled hunter, tracker, and fighter. Once at a corn shucking, where it was common for men to test their fighting skills against one another, Dick's father watched as his boy squared off with a grown man in a bare-knuckled brawl. The mountain man landed several crushing blows to the boy's face, sending him crashing to the ground, flat on his back. The crowd gasped in horror, and one concerned bystander spoke up to the father.
"My God, are you just going to let this man kill your boy? Please, you have to stop this now."
Yet the wily father chuckled and replied, "Oh, now, he's just getting warmed up." And sure enough, Dick sprang to his feet and landed one thunderous punch to the man's face, knocking 2 teeth clean from the fella's head and laid him out cold. Thus the legend of Fightin' Dick Collie was born. Well, on the morning of June 3rd, 1806, 13-year-old Dick Collie walked into Mr. Hepburn's office and promptly declared, plain as day, that he was the right man to oversee the businessman's land. Just like that, Dick kissed his mama goodbye and gave his father a firm handshake, and with little more than a rifle, and a couple good hunting dogs, the boy was now a man as he set out into the unknown wilds where no other soul had dared to tread. But would he survive? In the summer of 1806, Dick built a 3-walled cabin in the heart of the sandy basin in an area now known as Sand Lick, Virginia. The place was as lonesome as a graveyard at night. No roads, no neighbors, no smoke rising from any chimney for miles in any direction, just towering cliffs, dark hollers, an endless forest so thick that it swallowed the sun by midday afternoon. The howls of wolves echoed down the ridges at night, and panthers screamed from the laurel thickets like lost souls. Black bears were everywhere, and bobcats watched from the shadows with eyes that glowed like hot coals. Dick slept every night with his boots on, his rifle within arm's reach, and his hunting knife tucked under his pillow. Undeterred, he plowed a small patch of land where he planted Irish taters, corn, onions, and cabbage and melons. To provide for meat, he only had to shoulder his trusty rifle and dash into the thickets that surrounded his cabin. Within minutes, he'd have bear meat, venison, or turkey. For salt, he would fetch a bucket of brine from a nearby salt spring and boil it down into a chunk of salt. And for sugar, well, he boiled the sap of a sugar maple tree or fetched honey from the bees. But Dick didn't just hunt to survive. He hunted like he was born for it. One foggy morning, he was tracking a young buck along the edge of Dog Branch when his hounds broke off into a wild frenzy. Moments later, the woods erupted with snarls and sharp yelps. When Dick reached the scene, he found a massive black bear had turned on his dogs and was thrashing them with brutal swipes of his claws. One hound already laid motionless, and his best dog named Smoke, oh, he was bleeding bad. Without even thinking, Dick raised his flintlock and fired true, dropping the bear with a single shot. Then he wrapped Smoke in his hunting shirt and carried him 6 miles back to the cabin, nursing the old dog back to health like his kin. But not every hunt went so smooth. One crisp autumn evening, Dick followed a fresh trail of claw marks and broken branches through a narrow ravine near the mouth of Pound River. He figured it had to be a young bear, maybe 2 years old, just big enough to feed him through the winter. And as he crept through the hemlocks, he spotted the beast, rummaging near a rotting log. He steadied his rifle, took aim, and fired. But the powder just flashed and then fizzled, a misfire. Yet, before he could reload, the bear turned, with his teeth showing, and charged. Dick only had seconds to act. He dropped his rifle and drew his knife, but he stumbled on a root and lost grip. Suddenly the blade was lost in the underbrush. The bear slammed into him like a battering ram, knocking him flat as a pancake. And there the two wrestled in the dirt, with Dick wrapping his arms around the beast's thick neck, dodging snapping jaws and swinging claws. He kicked with all the power he had, drove his fist into the bear's snout, and gouged at his eyes. Over and over, the two rolled through the leaves, grunting and growling like wild animals locked in a death match. Finally, with a mighty roar, Dick managed to hook his arm under the bear's throat and then squeezed with every ounce of strength left in him. He had somehow won the battle.
Give someone you love the gift of old-fashioned storytelling. 4 books for the young and old alike that will make your heart smile. Click the link below to order your copy of the Appalachian Storyteller today.
Years went by, with Dick spending 9 months of the year living alone on the frontier and returning to Reed's Valley to replenish supplies and scratch his itch for fighting in saloons each spring. and by the time he was 20 years old, he married a like-minded woman in the valley who had the same pioneer spirit as him. And in 1825, he brought her to his cabin, and there the two would remain. Several children were born to this union, and Dick raised sheep, and his wife used the wool to make clothing for the youngins. The family was completely isolated from the outside world, with their closest neighbors being 30 miles away over the rugged mountains. Now, Dick Colley was strong of limb, heart, and temper, and it took all of that to conquer the wilderness. But no one ever questioned his bravery, nor did anyone who ever felt the wallop of his bruising fist soon forget its crushing power. One late afternoon in early spring, Dick stepped through the door of his pole cabin when he stopped dead in his tracks. There, in front of the hearth, stood his wife, cradling a black-furred, kitten-like creature to her chest, like it was a newborn baby. "Dear God, woman," Dick barked, "where on earth did you find that varmint?" His wife grinned, rocking the critter gently.
Well, isn't she the sweetest, cutest thing you ever saw? The boys found her in the woods, inside an old hollowed-out log. And the best part, there's 3 more of them, and they're going to fetch them right now.
Dick's blood ran cold. Now, in all the wild woods of Sandy Basin, the only creature more feared than a panther was a mama panther. She was swift, silent, and savage. And if she thought her youngins were in danger, she'd fight like the devil himself. Dick grabbed his rifle and his tomahawk and slung his hunting knife in his belt and whistled for his 2 best dogs. Surely, by now she knew one of her cubs was missing. And if Dick didn't get there before his boys did, oh, that panther would surely kill him. The mountaineer took off in a dead run, cutting across the ridge trail, through the thickets of laurel and tangled vine. By now the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the forest floor, and a wild wind was whistling across the hollows. Not far up Lick Creek, he found the log and tracks. They were deep and fresh, and appeared like they were circling. The cubs were gone, and sure enough, the mama had come back to find her nest empty. She was still close. He could feel it. Suddenly, the dogs growled low, and then, like a thunderclap, a scream tore through the woods, high and hollow, like death calling out. The dogs bolted ahead, and Dick followed, his heart hammering in his chest. Just then, he crested a bluff, and there she was, black as coal and twice as mean, crouched atop a rock outcrop, with her eyes burning yellow. Dick raised his rifle and pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. Oh no, the powder was wet. In one motion, he flung the rifle aside and he let his tomahawk fly. It spun through the trees and then trunked into the bark of a sycamore tree just inches above the angry panther. But that cat didn't flinch. Instead, she let out a terrifying roar and sprang towards Dick. He barely had time to draw his hunting knife before the beast was on him. She hit him like a cannonball, claws raking through his chest and teeth snapping for his throat. They rolled down the hill, man and beast, locked in a blur of fury and blood. She was all muscle, and she had the rage of 1,000 demons. But Dick Colley was made of tougher stuff than most men, and he fought with everything God gave him, punching and kicking and stabbing wherever he could get the blade in. Her breath was hot in his face, and her roar was like the tearing of the earth. Finally, his left arm clamped tight around her neck, and his right hand drove the blade just up underneath her ribs until he found the heart. Just like that, the beast stiffened, shuddered, and went limp on the mountain man's chest. The mountaineer was completely exhausted. His chest was heaving, with blood trickling down both of them. And when he stood up, he looked like a man back from hell's doorstep. His hunting shirt was ribbons. His hands were slicked with blood, and the panther still laid at his feet, eyes open and jaws wide. But at least he was still alive. He carved off one of the panther's ears and hung it above the cabin door as a warning to his boys to never mess with a panther again. Fightin Dick Colley was a true American pioneer, a man's man, an individualist living alone in what was to him paradise. Yet, as the decades went by, the trampling feet of home seekers followed him, and soon more cabins sprang up all over the Sandy Basin area. Yet Dick wasn't resentful. He knew he couldn't keep this paradise all to himself. More and more people came, and Fightin' Dick Colley became the most respected and feared man among them all. He saw the future, and he knew that what the area needed the most was roads, and he personally lobbied the Virginia government successfully in getting 2 major roads cut through the wilderness, connecting the Sandy Basin to the outside world. More people came, and soon schools and churches were built, and one of the most isolated places in America was now tamed. Fightin' Dick Colley died in 1858 in the mountains that he loved so much, and today this area is known as Dickinson County, Virginia. Most folks have probably never given a second thought as how this place got its name. Well, now my friends, you know the rest of the story. Fightin' Dick Colley was a man of adventure during an age when men were still truly free. He was the first white man to settle a remote area of Virginia known as the Sandy Basin, which was a vast virgin forest full of wild beasts when he first arrived over 200 years ago. His iconic battles with bears and panthers and other brawny men made him one of the most legendary figures in American history, whose name was once mentioned alongside Daniel Boone just 100 years ago. However, today, most people have never heard about his thrilling life, and his story has nearly been lost to the hands of time until now. Thanks so much for watching, my friends. I look forward to your comments below, and as always, be sure to like and subscribe for more true stories from Appalachia's past.